Good evening, Stuart Armstrong. How are you?
I am great, Juan. Good to see you. Haven't spoken to you for an awful long time, far too long, and I'm really glad to be here. I'm sorry that I've got such horrific Spanish. I just didn't pay enough attention at school. But anyway, I'm hopefully going to have a good conversation anyway.
One of the many things I bet you are regretting from school.
Many things.
Mate, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on board. I've given you some background on the group we've got here. This is a very curious bunch of coaches with people from all corners of the world. We've got Ireland, Argentina, Chile, Spain. We got a Dubai that is not on tonight, I think. Andrea is in Edinburgh, and Luis, who's just connected now, he is in the Canary Islands. So yeah, I mean, I think we're covering a vast proportion of the world right now. But again, it's great to have you on board. The sort of ethos of the evening is going to be to try to squeeze you and get as much juice out of you as we possibly can. So I think all the participants have one of them. If you guys want to show us, if you got your glass ready, there we go. We're going to try to fill our glasses with knowledge. Okay. The beverage was down to the participant to choose. So it might be a very interesting early bedtime for some people tonight, but we'll see how that plays along. But mate, I want to put you through some torture tonight, and I know there are some topics that literally do your head in, and I think we're gonna go straight into them without any sort of anesthetics or anything like that. I think we'll go just straight for the jugular, if that's okay with you.
Cool, go for it.
I've sent all these people your some sort of summary in a nutshell of who you are and what you've done. So hence why I'm not asking you to introduce yourself, because I'm hopeful everybody read it and have done some digging around and have actually done their research for tonight. I know lots of you are following on your podcasts and your websites and YouTube channels and stuff like that. So hence why. But mate, straight into it. Actually, let's do it the other way around. You tell me what's doing your head in right now the most in the pyramid. What's at the top?
There's wow, where do I start? There's so many things. Why do people keep telling people what to do?
Okay.
Is one thing. Why is technical information like crack to people? That's another one. Okay. I've just come off a webinar with Rob Gray from the Perception Action podcast, where we were talking about fundamental movement skills, and we were talking about why they don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
We also talk. One of the things that frustrates me is why people think that you can educate coaches in using like a very traditional style, and then ask them to be really creative and adaptable. I could go on. Just jump in. Go wherever you want to go. I'm happy.
It's like you're reading from my list. First one I had down was instructions, and I think that was the first one that actually came into your head. We've talked with this group around instruction, what happens in the human mind when we're instructing, what sort of impact has that had on decision-making process, and both on the learning process as such. So I don't know if you want to go straight into that one, into your very renowned remote control skills?
Instruction's interesting. In fact, this morning, I published a podcast and I had a conversation with a researcher called Ed Cope, who's based at Loughborough University, and he had published a article about instruction, and in that article he argued that instruction is not what you think it is, which was interesting. But anyway, I'll start with the common idea of what instruction is. And if you actually look it up in a dictionary, you will get can you hear me okay, Juan, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll get the definition of instruction is essentially to tell somebody what to do. It's to give them a order. It's to show them either how or what to do. Now, you might say to yourself, well, what's wrong with that? Why is that a problem? So I'm going to take you back a little step. There is a bit of a problem, which is it depends on how you see learning taking place. It depends on what your perception of the way people can learn is. So if, for instance, you see learning as close to sort of teaching, where there is an individual who has no knowledge and you as the coach have some knowledge, and your job is to give them your knowledge so that they can perform something, then instructions are perfect. Crack on and use loads of them. But I have learned over the years that that's actually quite a limited approach. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I think that's a limited approach a little bit in a minute. And if I forget to, please ask me.
I will.
But there's another way of thinking about learning. And the other way of thinking about learning is that the individual has a range of possibilities in front of them. And our job as coaches is to help them explore and discover which of those possibilities are best for them. So there's a really famous golf teacher called Fred Shoemaker who wrote this brilliant book called Extraordinary Golf. And he defines this difference really well. And he says, if you're instructing or teaching, what you're doing is you're trying to put something into somebody. Whereas if you're coaching, and he distinguishes coaching from teaching, if you're coaching, then what you're doing is you're trying to take something that somebody already has within them and you're helping them to bring it out. And I really love that idea of coaching. I really love that conceptualization that somebody has something within them and our job is to help them find it. And the reason I love that, and the reason I'm sort of really passionate about that, is because if you've ever had that experience, and I know I have on some occasions, if you've ever had that experience, it's so transformative. It's so powerful. But if you've had the other experience, which is the instructional experience, then that feels very transactional. So, you give me some knowledge and I take the knowledge and do something with it, hopefully. Whereas the other one is a transformational one where you, the individual learner, feel like you've discovered something. And it's really powerful. And if you as the coach are able to help somebody with that journey, not only is it transformational for them, it's transformational for you. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit addicted to it. I'm quite a lot addicted to it. Why is the instructional bit a problem? Well, the instructional bit creates what I call, or actually what people call, learned helplessness. So if somebody becomes reliant on you for the information, and they become grateful to you for the information that you're providing, then they're nearly always going to be reliant on you. And also, they are going to learn quite quickly that they don't have to be an active participant in learning at all, because you, the all-knowing coach, will provide them with the idea or the solution or the answer. And so actually what it does is not only turns them into have this learned helplessness, but it also makes them increasingly lazy and passive. Now, I don't know what you guys think, but my idea about skill isn't just about technique. It isn't just about learning a certain movement or a certain way of hitting a ball or kicking a ball or passing a ball or whatever it might be. It's about learning to solve the problems that the game or the activity presents, and learning the ways in which you can solve those problems, and discovering the ones that are best for you and discarding the ones that you probably don't think are that useful. So I see skill as that process. And so if people are going to become skillful, or they're going to become more capable, or whatever it is, then I'm really passionate about helping them and giving them the capability to find the way and to guide it. So I describe coaching as being like a guide by the side, or another way I describe it is to be a sense maker. And what I mean by that is you're sort of working with somebody and you're saying, let's work on this together. Let's work on the problem together, and I will help you to work through this problem together. But I'm not going to tell you how to solve the problem. What I might do is to give you a clue as to where you might look, or help you discover the things around you that might help you with that journey. So that's really why I feel instructions can be, or, well, firstly, I think they're overused. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when they are overused, we use them without fully realizing what the implications are. Now, by the way, I'm not saying we never instruct, and I'm not saying that we never teach. But what I am saying is we have to be very mindful about when we instruct and teach, how we instruct and teach, and also the potential downstream consequences of instructing and teaching, in terms of what that does to the learner, and what it does in terms of their commitment and ongoing commitment to solving problems and learning and becoming more skillful. So there you go. That was a very long answer to your first question, Juan.
Love it. And I think some of the glasses might be getting halfway through.
Mine's already half empty, so
half empty. There you go. Keep showing us your glasses. I've got a few bits to unfold from there, but I'm glad the conversation is starting to unfold. Chupete is in the south of Argentina, Stuart. He's got a question for you, and I think he's drinking some Polish spirit, so we might lose him very soon. Chupete, how are you?
Hola, ¿me escuchás, Andrea?
Sí, perfecto. Yo le traduzco a esto.
Lo único que tengo del polaco es esta bebida que hay acá, que es durísima.
Perfecto.
Esta bebida se llama Krupnik. Y era lo último que me quedaba de un amigo polaco. Es tremenda, es dulce, pero es como un anestésico. Lo voy a compartir. La pregunta a Stuart es, o una interpretación que lo quiero acompañar, es como que la vida está hecha al revés. Al adulto le cuesta ser creativo. Me pasa con todos los entrenadores que tengo en el club. Y creo que eso tiene que ver porque de chico nos dan instrucciones constantemente. Cuando uno es niño, cuando uno es adolescente. Entonces, cuando uno llega adulto, lo único que espera es que lo instruyan. ¿Cuánto mejor sería si de chico, en vez de darte instrucciones, te dan la posibilidad de ser creativo, cuando sos adolescente, seguís siendo creativo y no te cuesta mucho explorar cuando sos grande. Creo que es una teoría mía, no voy a descubrir la pólvora, pero me pasa en mis dos profesiones, que son el director deportivo del club y en la parte médica, cuando tengo que capacitar a ambos, a médicos y a entrenadores, que les cuesta tanto crear algo. Yo a veces me quedo callado 10, 15 minutos para que tiren una idea, y estoy incluyendo a médicos jóvenes, y les cuesta tirar una idea nueva, una creación. Y muchas veces me parece que tiene que ver con esto que estoy explicando. Lo veo en mis nietos. Siempre estoy dando indicaciones. Lo veo cuando mis hijos eran adolescentes, indicaciones. Y lo veo en los adultos. O sea, lo único que hice fue crear adultos que están recibiendo lo que Stuart dice y que nunca los ayudé a explorar. Por eso ahora en el club lo que intento hacer es, hago la del psicólogo o la del psiquiatra. Tiro una pregunta y me quedo callado. Total, como no me tienen que pagar la consulta, yo espero que digan algo. Era una idea como para continuar lo de Stuart. Gracias.
Gracias, Chubete. Stuart, after Dr. Chubete, he's a doctor actually, and he's the sports director as his club in the south of Argentina. And he gave us a brief explanation around his drink and where it came from his friend in Poland. And he basically is backing you up and sort of sustaining your point around how we tend to grow up in environments that are fully instructional. And he sees when he's trying to develop other coaches and other doctors. So he's now in the tendency of asking questions and waiting for answers. And he's had some long silences in both of his professions. So I think it's just trying to support your point, and he's got this theory that that is one of the reasons why people struggle with creativity when they become adults.
I think it's a really good point. This learned helplessness is everywhere. And from quite an early age, we're subjected to it. Even as parents, you know, I mean, I've had to check myself as a parent to not always be the one with the answers for my kids. And it's pretty hard, isn't it? Because for those of you who are parents, you know, part of your job is to keep them safe. So instructions are pretty, you know, when my 3-year-old daughter, she's a bit older now, but when she starts walking close to the fire, I can't like say, do you think it's the right thing to walk close to that hot fire? Do you think that's a good decision? I can't really do that. You just have to say no. So it's got to be in the right moment, and you've got to, and this is the point about the suitability, but because they're overused in education, and because they're overused, generally speaking, children find it very difficult actually when you do invite them to volunteer information. If they're not used to that, they find it quite difficult. And I've been in that situation as well, where you're silent. And I've found a couple of little solutions to that, by the way, in case any of you have ever experienced this with groups of kids who don't necessarily want to volunteer. Now, what you have to remember with, again, I think it's different in different cultures, and so I'm perfectly willing to be corrected on this. But certainly here in the UK, one of the things I've experienced quite a lot is children having quite a significant fear of failure and anxiety, particularly with a peer group. And so often they're not willing to answer a question because they're fearful of looking stupid or getting it wrong, or or saying something that everybody else thinks is stupid, or even they're fearful of answering a question because it looks like they're wanting to be the coach's favorite, and all that. And certainly here in the UK, kids like, they'll zone in on kids who are trying to do that. So it's pretty interesting dynamic. And there's differences as well between the genders. You sometimes find that you often get certain kids are very keen to answer, some aren't, some like to hide. So I've got a load of techniques that I've learned over the years when it comes to communicating, and with questions in particular. And I'm happy to share some of them now if you want me to, Juan.
Hey, I've got questions written down, and between brackets, I've got bingo. So over to you.
Okay, so firstly, I think it's really important that when you're creating an environment, that you firstly qualify that answering questions is central to the way you're going to engage. When I first started working in the talent pathway for England hockey, working with some of the kind of the best under 18-year-olds in the country, after working with this group for about 10 weeks or so, one of the players, the teacher, came over to me just as we were starting the sessions, one of his teachers, and said to me, "I think you're having an effect here." And I said, "Okay, why is that then?" He said, "Because I asked this player what he thought of the sessions. And his response was, he said, it's really good, but they make you think a lot and you have to answer loads of questions." And I thought, yes, we've got somewhere here. Because when I first started working with them, they all came from like schools where they were very used to getting instructions a lot and being told what to do. So they weren't natural at responding to questions. So I had to frame the sessions and say, you're here because somebody thinks you've got something that might mean that you could move further on in this talent world. I'm here to help you. And the one thing I can tell you is, if you're someone who isn't going to contribute and you hide in the background and you haven't necessarily got an answer to a question, then the coaches at the next stage are going to know. And they're going to look at that and think, not sure how much they're involved and engaged in the activity. And I do that with my club players, by the way. Frame it and say, there's lots of you here. I'm very lucky I've got quite a few players. I might have to make a decision about who might play this week, and what are the things I'm going to be looking for. And they know now by now that I'm looking for players who are thinking their way through an activity. I'm looking for players who are engaged. I'm looking for players who are supporting each other and everything else. So answering questions is going to be part of that. But I've also got a few little tricks. So firstly, I frame the environment to say, this is a learning environment, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I want you to ask me questions, and we're going to ask each other a lot of questions, because that's part of what we do. And I'm pretty conditioned now. If you ask me to give somebody an instruction, I actually find it very difficult to do without asking a question. Very difficult. But I have a few other tricks when I'm introduced to a new group that I'm happy to share with you. So I do something called cold calling, which is a technique I got from a brilliant book called Teach Like a Champion by a guy called Doug Lemoff, who basically did a study of great teachers, and he discovered 49 techniques, and he's got loads of videos of these techniques. You can search them on YouTube. And cold calling is one. I don't use all the techniques, but this is one. And cold calling basically means that you don't go with the people with the hands up. You say, right, you might ask a question about the activity, and you will come to one of those players, and you choose them. So they get to understand that you're not going with the hands. You're just going to go at random to various people, and it could be you. So they get used to the idea that, not thinking this through and knowing that there's going to be a question coming, is a key thing. The other thing is to get them to know before they go into a session or an activity what it is that we might want to attend to. So I might say before they begin the activity, I might say to them, right, we're going to go into this activity, and this activity is going to be all about your ability to be aware of space. What I would like you to think about is how aware you are of space and how well you can use it, for example. So I'm dangling the question before the activity. So now what we've done is we've drawn attention to something. So instead of them just playing mindlessly or like playing but like noticing lots of different things, I might shape their attention by saying, I want you to consider these things. And then we maybe do a little bit of a huddle session or something. I will say, what did you notice? First thing I'd say is, what was it we were attending to? Now, you nearly always get quite a lot of them not knowing because they completely forgot. And then you say, right, does anybody know? And they come back. Ordinarily, I'll send them back in, actually. Say, we're attending to this, and then go back in, come back out. So then I'll say, right, what were we attending to? We're attending to that. Okay, great. What did you notice? David, Jenny, or Robert, or whoever. Now, there's no way you can answer that question incorrectly. What did you know? Well, in fact, there's only one way you can answer that question, which to say is, I didn't notice anything, because it meant you were either asleep, unconscious, or your mind was switched off, none of which are acceptable. So you must have noticed something. And all I want you to do is to share with me what you noticed. So it's very unthreatening. There's no right or wrong answer. Mm-hmm. I don't get into the coach question guessing game. Like, I've got the right answer in my head, and you guys just throw out answers until eventually you get to the right one, and then I'm going to shower you with praise for getting to the right one. We don't play that game because that gets boring quick. What we do is what we say is, what is it you noticed related to what we were attending to? Because they'll always come out with loads of other things. But what did you notice related to what we're attending to? I noticed this. That's really interesting. What else did you notice? I noticed that. Okay, great. Now we're going to go back in. Tell you what, you noticed that, you noticed that. Let's stay with that, and let's live in that space and keep attending to that, and we'll explore that a little bit further. So framing the questions in that way, and cold calling is one of the things I do. Now then, if somebody, when you cold call, says, they give you the blank space, and they're just basically going to say, right, I'm going to stare you out until you go away, because I've learned to do this. If I stay quiet for long enough, you'll go away and you won't come back. And I go, I tell you what, is that difficult? I say, who can help? And somebody will say, oh, I can help. I say, okay, what did you notice? I noticed this, this, and this. I said, okay, that's great. And I'll come back to that person and say, now you've heard them notice that. Did you notice anything? Or I'll say, before I go somewhere else, I'll say, I tell you what, I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. I'm just going to go somewhere else, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, cool. What do you notice? You notice that? Okay, great. Now come back to you, Gemma. What did you notice? And that's called no opt-out. There's no opting out. So firstly, I'm going to come to you, and if you haven't noticed anything, then there's still no way out, because you've got to have noticed something. And then if after that point they say they still didn't notice anything, I said, well, okay, I'll give you this chance, right? When we go in, we're going to do the session, we're going to attend to this. When I come back, I'm going to come to you first. So I want to see what you notice. And over a period of time, they get to understand that I'm relentless about this. I'm not going to have a session where people can just mindlessly disengage. Don't get me wrong, I do sessions like that because actually sometimes it's just about fun and engagement, particularly with different age groups. But most of the time, if I'm in the learning space, particularly if I'm working with athletes or groups who are purporting to want to stretch themselves and want to go further, then this is one of the biggest areas of stretch that I find. What I mean by stretch is, this is the area where they're usually most out of their comfort zone, because they're really not used to this kind of dialogue. And I'm absolutely committed to it, because how else can I get from them what they're experiencing? The only thing I'm interested in is what they're experiencing. And by understanding more about what they're experiencing, I can then shape the environment to help their learning, or I can respond to their observations and experiences and frame things related to their own experience as opposed to my observations. So one of the things I've learned quite quickly is that the solicitation of information, getting information from them, is one of the most valuable things that I can do as a means by which to help them learn. And the final thing I'll say about that is that process of gaining information is one of the things that if I ever do a coach development activity and I go and observe coaches, nearly always it's the thing that I see that is an area that I would potentially draw their attention to. Usually the information exchange is the other way around. The ratio is completely the other way. And in most cases, it's 80% from coach to athlete. And it should at least be 50-50. If not, the ratio should be 70% athlete to coach. If we're genuinely interested in drawing them into our learning world. Right. That was really long. Sorry, Juan.
Don't worry. I'm going to make it even longer. I've got 2 words I'm going to leave for some sort of end of the conversation, which are drills and cones. So we're going to leave that for a big finale. And there's lots of stuff in the chat, which I'm conscious I need to get to straight away. But just before we do that, there's 2 things I wrote down on your last reflection. First, the question: is it always you using those strategies, the call to call, the cherry picking, all the bits you just described? The second one is a word that doesn't translate into Spanish greatly, which is scaffolding. I'm going to leave Andrea to deal with that one.
Did I say scaffolding?
You didn't, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna throw you into that puddle because I always see the guys, girls, all right, go and have a conversation about this out of nowhere, or go and talk about what just happened in the attack, and we got 12-year-olds looking at each other, talking about something else for 30 seconds, and then they're back into the game. So,
yeah.
A, is it always you facilitating those conversations? And B, how do we ease off? How do we scaffold into those bits?
Yes. So yeah, good question, and I'm glad you asked me that. Yeah, not always. I mean, if I am the person, kind of probing and sort of soliciting information, then yes, but not always. Correct. And you're absolutely right. I see wasted huddle time everywhere. They're just having a chat, aren't they? And actually, one of the things that you can do with that is to really help them to very quickly review. So there's a number of different ways of doing that. The one I use is I think it's important that they have a framework that they can use to do a review. And the one I use a lot is ACE, so ACE. So what are we aware of? What corrections are there? And how will we execute? So that's one. There's a few others that I've used in the past as well, but it's just to give them a quick framework, because I pretty much always put if it is self-directed activity, which quite often it is, I always put a time limit on it, very short time limit, because you don't get 5-minute huddles in games, rarely, unless there's an injury or something. In my world, you don't anyway in hockey. So it's like a maximum of about 20 seconds. So I'll say, team up 20 seconds and start counting. And they've been given the ACE. Now I might go and listen in. And then I might help them with a bit of summarizing. What is it you said you were going to do? You're going to do that and that. Okay, great. And then I go and listen to another one. What you said you're going to do? That and that. Okay, that's great. just to clarify, because you get a lot of voices. Sometimes it's like, well, you're the person who does the review next. You're the person. So they're all getting used to being the captain of their own little team. So yeah, I'm not always the one. But if I'm honest, Juan, there's a bit of a work on of mine, that not being the person at the center. But I have about 20 players, you see, so sometimes it's very difficult to do all the self-management. But as much as possible, yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to rewind a little bit in our conversation, if that's okay. Once again, I know you're a big fan of the remote control. We had a session no long ago where we touched base on capacities, and the 6 sort of phrases that you have seen on your screen right now. They got to do with problem solving, critical thinking, learning to learn, responsibility and commitment, working with others, and communication. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a bit of background on that. Now, one of the common themes in this group has been, okay, well, how do we translate this into our design practice? Okay, so how do we take these bits that we all agree on, hence why we are forging human beings and not hockey players, cricket players, rugby players. How do we take this into a session planning, designing our practices? Talk us a little bit. I know that we could be hours on this, but I know you're...
Well, to keep it brief, I think it's very challenging to try and do them all.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you should just do one.
Okay.
Because realistically, you're going to have dimensions of all of those in every activity you do, I would hope. You're going, I hope anyway, you're going to have problem solving. You're going to have communication. You're going to have working with others. So I would argue that you want to try and keep as many of those things in play, but you might not focus on them all when you're referring. So you might have one that's sort of stronger than the other.
Yeah.
So how do you put that into your practice design? Good question. Well, remind me of the 6 things again. Let me write them down. Problem solving.
Communication, learning to learn.
Yeah.
Working with others.
Yeah.
Problem solving.
Yeah.
Responsibility and engagement. No, engagement is the wrong word. Compromiso. What's compromiso? People are shouting at me and I can't hear them. Oh my God, the word's gone. Commitment. Thank you.
Oh, commitment.
She's not only an interpreter, but she knows science language as well.
Okay, so in your practice design,
critical thinking. It's missing
critical thinking. Okay. So if you create an environment, if in your practice design, so I think of practice design like gardens. I'm going to share my screen with you.
Yep, you should be able to.
Okay, bear with me. Share screen. So I hope everyone can see that.
I knew the gardens were coming out. Let's just give Andrea 1 second or perhaps a couple of minutes to try to go through that, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'll go through them and then hopefully they can make sense. I'll go through them sequentially. Yep. So I'll start from the left. So if you I think about these as like, kind of gardens or environments. So these are environments, and this is the way we can design learning environments. Mm-hmm. So your environment can be, on the left-hand side, it's what they call sort of content or subject-based. So it's activity-led, and it would be largely based around things like techniques and tactics. And it would be led by the learning of techniques and tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the right-hand side, what we have is more experience or problem-based learning. So what we do is we create a space where an individual is presented with an experience or a problem, and then they're going to make sense of that experience themselves. And based on their own capabilities, that's how they're going to act in that space. So on the left-hand side is what they'll call a Baroque garden. I'm wondering, Juan, is Baroque a Spanish word?
I think it's French.
French, okay. So you can imagine these very ordered and structured gardens that the French used to love, where all the hedges were neatly clipped and everything was in the right place, and you walked through in a certain fashion. It's very controlled, fixed. Everything's prescribed, knowledge is taught, and the coach acts as an instructor. Or you can think of more like a family garden, a bit like my garden behind here, which is a bit more messy. There's more things you can do depending on the space, but it's quite tightly constrained, and you can't go too far, and you can't get into too much danger, but you've got a few more options. So it's constrained, framed. It's kind of descriptive of the activity of the space. Knowledge is sometimes revealed, and the coach acts more like a leader. But then you've got what we call, then you've got a meadow. So think of a meadow, a field, and in the field, there's lots of places you can go. You can explore. There's lots of places, but it's got a fence around it. So you can still explore. You can go in the long grass. You can go in the trees. You can go into a different part of the meadow and look at you've got lots of places you can go, but you can only go so far. And there is a path. And the coach is a guide. And you're acquiring knowledge as you work through that garden. And the coach is guiding you and helping you on the path that you've set out. And you can go off the path, but the coach will sort of help you to sort of stay close to the path that you've chosen for yourself. Or you can think of it like a wilderness, like a jungle, where it's very chaotic. And there's lots of things going on, and it's very explorative. And in there, you're just going to discover things. You're literally stumbling across them because they're right in front of you. And in that scenario, we describe the coach as a sense maker. So what you're doing is you're working with an individual with the problems that they have, and you're helping them make sense of their environment. And you might draw their attention to the information in the environment that might help them solve the problem, because they might not be able to solve it for themselves. Now, the thing about these is that these are kind of environments where the coach acts in a certain way, and you design the environment in a certain way. Now, in the Baroque garden, one of the reasons why the instructions take place and we're teaching and being prescriptive is because people have an idea that there is things that must be taught. We're limited on time, and we want to try and get information across quickly. And in the Baroque garden, you can do that very quickly. And actually, you can see, kind of knowledge being taken on board. But you have to understand that it's quite fragile and it's quite shallow. So whilst you can get a lot of knowledge provided, it doesn't go very deep. So it doesn't necessarily embed with the learner, but you've got it there. Yeah. And if you come right across to the wilderness and the jungle, in that scenario, learning can be very slow. It can be very painful. It can be struggle. It can be a real struggle. It can be difficult. But it's very deep. And it stays with that individual. It's kind of sort of built into their DNA, if you like. It's sort of baked in. And most people tend, because of the slowness of the wilderness and the difficulty and the uncomfortableness for the learner, and because they know that the instructional approach only goes so far and doesn't really do what we're looking for, most people tend to operate somewhere between the family garden and the meadow. They tend to sort of hop over that fence and try not to spend too much time in the family garden. I'm challenging myself, and have been for the last however many years, to operate somewhere between the meadow and the wilderness as much as I can, sometimes every now and again hopping out into the family garden, rarely going baroque, but every now and again I go there. I'm hoping that metaphor makes some sense, because I think it's a useful way, or at least it's a way I think of how we might design learning environments. Because if you take your 6 dimensions of problem solving, learning to learn, working with others, responsibility, commitment, and critical thinking, you're going to get more of that in some of these environments than you are in others. You're not going to get very much learning to learn and problem solving, and maybe not that much responsibility and critical thinking in the Baroque garden, because it's all instructional. But you'll get more of that in the meadow and in the wilderness. So your environment probably needs to be more problem-based and experiential than it is taught and directional. And your role and the way you act, whether you're instructing or leading or guiding or sense-making, and I'm not saying you do just one of these, you slide around a bit, of course we do, but you're going to operate in one space more than another. And actually, the more aligned you are with your principles, and the more you want to stay with your principles, the more you're probably going to try and operate in one place. And I'll be honest with you, it's not easy, but I do genuinely believe it's worthwhile. So there you go.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And I'm sure the glasses are starting to get to the top. Let's have a look.
Mine's going down.
Yours going down. You're the only one to. The idea, you're the only one allowed for it to go down. The idea was try to get as much juice out of you as possible. The original question that we were, or that you were reflecting on, came from Sergio's in Mendoza. He makes the best Argentinian barbecue in the East. So
I am a fan of the Argentinian barbecue, I have to say. I've never had one in Argentina, so I probably haven't ever lived, but I think you've got an invite.
I think you've got an invite pending as well. But we're going to move to sort of the other end of the country. We're going to go to Bahia Blanca, where Terre Mariano is there. He's got a question here in the chat, and he wants to know how would you try to how would you try to promote the habit of reflection, and how would you try to reflect on what's going well and try to get that the mistake, the actual mistake, to have a connotation of a learning possibility or a learning outcome?
Is that reflection for the athletes or reflection for you as the coach?
Terre?
Hola. Para el jugador, cómo ayudar, cómo motivar a encontrar el proceso de la mejora continua en el jugador.
Okay, for the player, Stuart. Gracias, Terre.
So how do you get the players to get into the habit of reflecting, understanding when something may have not gone as well as they could, and then using it as a learning opportunity and as a learning moment?
Yes, you've got it, yeah.
So I've got a few little strategies on that. Well, one thing is, I wonder how many people in the room tonight ever give points for failing. I'm not going to ask people to put their hands up, but I experimented with this. So I have a little mantra or a little phrase that the kids are a bit bored of now, which is that fail, the English word fail, stands for first attempt in learning. And what we're trying to do is to encourage young people to take the opportunity to fail in a safe to fail environment. And we encourage them that if they're actually stretching themselves and challenging themselves appropriately, the mistakes, if you like, or things going wrong or not going to plan are central to that. So firstly, we're going to create a culture where we're saying we're actually encouraging you to try things that might be beyond your capability. Now, you have to be really clear what that means. So that doesn't mean just messing around. What it means is, you know, trying to do something that you know is not the norm, and putting yourself out there and being prepared for it to go wrong. And then we're going to work together to work out what we can take from that as a means by which so we've got to understand, and we've got to reframe our relationship with failure. And it's very difficult with kids, because certainly in the UK, they're not really associated. They don't associate failure as, you know, it's not a good thing. So in general, it's quite hard. So firstly, it's not really a failure anyway. It's just a first attempt in learning, and it's a good thing. The second, and then I reward it. So I might shout, I might say, and what I've done in the past is I use cones for this. So as Juan will tell you in a minute, that I'm not a fan of cones for certain purposes. But one reason I use them is I'll have a load of cones dotted about or put to the side of the pitch. And I will say, Thomas, failure point, get a cone. And they'll go and get a cone, and they'll go and put it for their team, and it's bonus points. Why? Because they tried something that was beyond their capability. It didn't quite go according to plan, but they were prepared to try. And so I'm placing value, genuine value, in the activity that they're doing on the attempt. Not the attempt. So we're pushing them and suggesting to them that there's value. Now, when it comes to reflection, I might do this a number of different ways. Sometimes I'll do that with them individually. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. What did you get there? What did you get from that? So the question's nearly always sort of loaded in that space of, what did you get from that? What happened? Tell me about it. So I'm trying not to place any judgment on it. You see that there? What happened? Happened to me again when I was in the talent thing, and it was girls and boys. We'd mix them up. We don't normally do that. And one of the girls had got the ball, and she just went 1v1 against this massive guy who's at the back. And she did this move, and it was like fantastic. And just because he's big and strong, he managed to reach his stick out and get the ball off her. He was done for. And I called her over to me. I said, tell me all about it. And she went, oh, I know, I probably should have waited. I probably should have passed. Gave me all the things that she thought she should have done. I said, anything good? Anything good? She said, well, you know, it nearly worked. Yeah. And what was it about that? I said, is there anything that you felt like you'd have done differently? No. I said, what you could have done. No, I said, not what you could have done is, do you know what I thought about it? I thought it was brilliant. I said, do you know why I thought it was brilliant? Because I know loads of people who wouldn't have even tried. And you did. Now, he just about got the ball off you. But realistically, you and I know, and he knows too, that you had him on toast. You totally had him on toast. And he just got lucky. Now, the only challenge I've got for you now is, can you do more? Anyway, that was my goal. So what was I trying to do there? A couple of things. One was confidence. The other one was explanation. Another one was, actually, I've noticed something you did there. You might feel it was a bad thing. I want to tell you something different. I want to reframe it for you. I want to offer you an alternative. So it's trying to use an affirmation. So that's the first. So the first thing is that. And then the final thing, and this is this point about reflection. Firstly, I'm soliciting it all the time. What did you notice? What did you see? What happened? What did you feel? Sometimes I'll do it live while they're playing. What do you feel? Yeah, got it. Fist bump. Virtual fist bump over distance. That kind of thing. So we're reflecting all the time. We might have the huddly reflections. But the other big one is to try and take judgment out of the space. So I've tried to stop doing praise. And in actual fact, I posted a video on YouTube today on my YouTube channel about not doing praise. Because praise is dangerous, because praise implies judgment. So they don't need my judgment, they need their judgment. So instead of praising, I'm not saying this is not a bad thing, right? It's very difficult for me not to do this because I actually love creating a motivational climate and showering them with praise. But if I take the judgment out of the equation, all there is information, and the information is entirely neutral. And all I'm ever going to do is solicit the information from them. So they get very used to the idea of volunteering information. So at one point last night, there was one player, I actually just called a halt to proceedings because they'd lost their focus for 1 minute, and they all said that they were going to stay focused for 10 minutes and they couldn't. So they lost their focus and dropped out. I said, okay, stop. I think we might have lost our focus. And I turned around and went, Rory, what are you doing right now? And he looked at me and he went, nothing. And I went, yeah. And he said, what could you be doing? Something. Okay. So he knew that there was a moment. So then a bit later on, I asked him, I said, okay, what's something we just learned from that little session there? And he goes, never be doing nothing. I went, yes, very nice. Good. So they know that there's going to be that information. So the process of reflection just becomes really normal. And I'm trying to take judgment out of the space. And instead I use things that I notice. So I might share with them things I noticed, like I did with that girl, but that's an affirmation. It's different from praise. There's no judgment. It's just, I noticed this. What do you think about it? And then if they ask me, I'll say, I have some thoughts I'll share with you. But it's not praise, it's what you notice. And it's so much more powerful. And I highly recommend, if you can use it, if you can switch from praise to affirmation, it's like, honestly, it's like the magic dust.
Love it. I did see the alert coming on my YouTube today, so I'm still gonna go and watch that. And we have talked about feedback in this group. I've actually stole your ninja's definition. And we're using the ninja feedback warriors, feedback ninjas. Yeah. And we talked a lot about how can we remove the value or detach the value of the praise of the feedback from the outcome and concentrate on the actual process, which I know you're a big fan of as well. And I'll tell you, Stuart, every time we finish these conversations, I send out an email to all the group with some resources, and I'm going to include a number of your resources there. Sergio has shared in the chat drills are the drugs of coaching, which is got now, 2 or 3 years now, maybe? Something like that.
It's one of the first ones, yeah.
Yeah. And I know you had a bit of a backslash on it, but anyway, we won.
Still fighting that backlash, yeah.
Still do. Anyway, and as usual, guys, we're going to share all the resources. Stuart, there were a few of the participants asking about the author of Teaching Like a Champion.
A guy called Doug Lemov, Lemov. Lemov.
Brilliant. I'll make sure I'll share that with all of you guys.
He's actually just about to bring out a book on coaching, and I'm going to have him on the podcast.
Brilliant. We're gonna get that. Can you get the transcripts for the podcast?
I've just invested in a platform called Otto, which does transcripts for me. Fine. So it's possible, yes.
Brilliant. So that could be easily be copied and pasted, someone translated, which is fantastic. But anyway, again, Dr. Chupete in Argentina, he's just bought 300 cones for his clubs, and he's seriously thinking about how can he start some sort of non-lethal fire with them after our conversation. So let's go into cones and drills just to let you. I don't know if you're going to go to bed or finish your beer, whatever it is, but I'm conscious of the time.
I mean, cones I'm less bothered about, right? So, I mean, everyone sort of jumps on the cones thing. I mean, I'm not a fan of using cones as a way to direct where someone should move. Because, like, if you have to dribble from one cone or round a cone or anything like that, it's got no relevance. It's not real. and trust me, just observe it. And if you add, particularly if you've got a group, if you've got nothing else, like it's just literally a kid in a back garden, there's no one else around, and it's the only way to actually get them to change direction, okay, fine. But if there's other people and we've come together to work together, why not use the other person as something that's going to move? Because what we're trying to do, aren't we, is we should be learning to move based on what the other people do. Mm-hmm. That's skill. So if I'm running at you, Juan, and I run one way and then you run another way, I'm going to change direction and we're going to try and avoid each other. So that's the reason, we need to keep it real. And so we need to use other people as much as we possibly can as a means by which for us to learn to move. Now, cones are cool, I think, for creating space. I think they're really good for that. I prefer, if I'm honest, strips because they don't get in the way as much. But I don't mind using them for space because, and the reason I don't use cones for this, and I'll tell you why, is because I like to mark my area out with loads of different spaces, different size spaces, so that my session can flow from a big space to a small space to a bigger space to a smaller space to a smaller space. And it happens with just natural flow, and I don't have to keep moving the stuff around. Cones, you can't always do that because, for example, if my ball has to roll over a cone, sometimes it'll hit it away. So I just use the flat markers or the flat strips, rubber strips, and I put them down and I just use those to mark out my spaces, and then I can flow from one to the other. And I like to use different space as a way to change the environment for the players so that they get a different problem to solve. So you can make the pitch narrow, or you can make it, wide or short or a strange shape, or all that sort of stuff. And I'm a big fan as well of, do use cones. I'll say to the players, right, they almost do like an individual, like a panna type game where, right, here you go, here's 2 cones, they're your goal, that's your goal, right, off you go. 1v1, me and my ball time, let's play. And that's their creativity time, that's their opportunity to try different things. It's very fluid. I walk around, I call it like a free swim. They just they're playing. And then I just say, if they want me, they can show me how, they might ask me, how can I do this? How can I do that? Or I might throw in a little challenge and say, right, you gotta do it using this side of the stick or that side of the stick, that sort of stuff. So cones are cool for that, right? Now drills are a different thing altogether. So there's a spectrum of practice forms, aren't there? I'll be clear about what a drill is. A drill it comes from military, comes from training, and a drill is designed that you repeat a movement over and over and over and over and over again until it becomes robotic. And I think some people assume that using a drill is valuable because you want people to become robotic. You want them to have, muscle memory. You want them to be able to do things without thinking. It's the traditional approach to skill acquisition. Learn the movement, apply the movement, put the movement into the game. But there's an alternative. There's a different way of looking at the way skill comes, which is that skill is actually something that emerges from the problems presented in an environment, and your solutions to the problems is how skill develops. So you need the environment as a means to develop skill. And if you take somebody out of the environment, then they're developing a technique, maybe a movement pattern, but they might not be developing skill. And some of you may have had this experience whereby you take people out of the environment, you do stuff, you break it down into small component parts, you work in isolation, you then put it back together in the game, and it doesn't work, it goes to pieces. Mm-hmm. You must have all experienced that. I certainly have. And my answer used to be, let's do more of the isolated stuff, because that was the only solution I had. And there's a famous old phrase, I don't know if you have the same phrase in Spanish, which is, if the only tool you've got is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And it's the same. I only had one tool, which was isolated drills. And now I've got a massive repertoire of opportunity, of things I can do other than that. So this idea is, and a lot of people also think that you need to use a drill, which is an isolated thing. There's no other people around. You're just moving with there's no other information. There's no chaos. There's nothing to distract you. So you can just purely and simply rehearse the movement. But there's another really important phrase which Andrew Wilson, who came on the podcast, shared with me, and he says, and the reason people think about that's good is because their assumption is that if there's lots of distraction, lots of noise, lots of variability, then people won't be able to concentrate on the movement and then won't do the movement properly. And what Andrew Wilson shared with me, he said, the variability, it's not noise, it's the signal. It's what tells you what needs to be done. You need the variability. You need the noise, because that's the information that you need to define the action. So actually, doing stuff isolated, you're actually doing something else. You're learning a different movement pattern. And I don't know about the different games that you're involved in, but I had a great quote recently from Rafa Nadal, where he basically said he's never hit the same shot twice in his life. Every shot is different. They might be similar, but they're different. And he has to move differently for every single shot. And he knows, and he's recognized as a skillful performer, that actually his way to become skillful is to understand how he needs to move for each individual shot. Understand some of the similarities, understand what's good and bad, blah, 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 what helps, what doesn't help. But really, it's just about understanding how to move within each given moment, depending on what the opponent does as well. And that's one of the reasons he wins the French Open, because he's so adaptable to whatever somebody else does. They can't beat him. He's got an answer for them. Whatever they do, they get close, but then he comes back because he knows how to find a way to win. And he's a super adaptable, highly attuned, skillful athlete. And that is a skillful athlete, not somebody who can hit movement patterns in an idealized scenario. Someone who knows how to move in the moment, in the context. And if we're going to develop those kinds of skillful performers, we must provide the context for them to experience as opposed to taking them out of it, because we rob them of vital, useful information that defines movement. So that's a very long-winded way of describing what I'm talking about, but I don't like drills because I don't think they work. And I think with a little bit of creativity, we can turn a drill into a really exciting experience. Oh, and the other reason is because they're dead boring. And I would rather that the children had a great time. And actually, if you can provide them with now it doesn't mean it's all about games. There's a lot of things you can do in between. But that's a different day. We'll talk about that a different time.
Brilliant. So if you do this, then we play, basically.
The other way around. Let's play. Let's play. Let's discover some things that we might want to explore more. And let's reduce the play down a little so that we can spend more time focusing on the stuff that we want to explore and then come back to the play. So we have a phrase, whole, part, whole. Mm-hmm. I don't like whole, part, whole. I prefer whole, the game. Less of the whole, less of the whole, less of the whole, more of the whole, more of the whole, more of the whole. But nearly always starting with the game.
Brilliant. Mate, almost 11:15 in the UK. We're going to leave you to finish your beer in peace. We are going to do a virtual toast, though, with our full glasses, which I'm sure some of them are overspilling. There we go. This is a virtual toast.
Cheers.
Cheers, salute. All right, and then we're going to start drinking some of the juice, beverage, water, whatever it is that we've been extracting from you. We're going to leave you to go and enjoy the rest of your evening, Stuart. There are lots of questions that's still coming through, and a couple of hands up here, but we're going to leave them for the next encounter. I'm sure there'll be a next one. Thank you so much in behalf of everyone here. I'm going to open everyone's mics for them to thank you. We're going to stay in the call for another 5 minutes or so, just to wrap it up. We're going to let Stuart and Andrea get on with their evenings. So thank you very much, Stuart. Absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Stuart.
Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias, thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.